Testing, testing. All right, testing, 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 testing. All right, here we go. Subpart C, specification for cylinders, 178.35, general requirements for specification cylinders, compliance with the requirements subpart with required in details, inspection analysis, chemical analysis test required for the subchapter must be made with the United States unless otherwise provided with the written associated administrative accordance with the subpart I with the part 1707. This chapter inspection verification must be performed an independent inspection agency approved and written on the associated administrative accordance with the subpart I part 107 of this chapter for the data specification 3B, 3B, 3E, 4B, 4BA, 4D, water capacity less than 1100 cubic inches, 4B, 240, E2, 4A, 4A, AA, 480, 4L, 8, 8AL, 8, 4BW, 39 marks, surface pressure 8, 900 psi gauge or lower, 4E manufactured United States of component inspectors manufacturer duty inspect the inspector. So determine each of the cylinder maker conform with the application specification, each of the except for the otherwise specified by the applicable specification inspector shall perform the following: inspect all the materials rejecting with the not may applicable requirements for cylinders made with the billet piercing process of the billet should be inspected, showing that the free with the pipe of the cracks, assess the segregation of the injurious defects or part or when applicable the nick of the cold break. Verify the material of the construction meet the requirements for the applicable specification, making the chemical analysis, each heat of the material obtained with the certified chemical with the analysis of material manufacturer, heat of the material with the ladle, and analysis of the acceptable, and analysis of the not provided with the heat of the material with the manufacturer made by mark of the check with the analysis of the symbol for each coil and sheet with the tube verifying compliant with the cylinder applicable specification, verifying identification of the material is proper, inspect with the inside of the cylinder by four closing ends, verify the heat of the treatment is proper, obtain the sample with all the test chemical analysis recommended location test specification taken from the welding cylinder depicted with the figures 1 through 5 in Appendix C of the subpart of the specification construction design. Witness of all the leaks and verify the threads by gauge. Report volumetric capacity, tear weight, C, the report form, minimum thickness, all well noted. Verify each of the cylinder marked in accordance with the application specification. Inspector report, prepare a report containing minimum application information listed in the CGA 6011 and additional information marked for those required. The applicable specification must be shown with the test and signature of the inspector on the report certifying with the process of the manufacturer. Heat treatment of the cylinder where observed. Found unsatisfactory, inspector must furnish the complete with the test report required for the subpart with the mark of the cylinder upon request of the purchaser. Test report must retain the value inspector for the 15 years original test date of the cylinder. B. Defects attachment cylinders must conform to the following. Any cylinder with a may not be constructed with material seams and cracks and laminations other injurious defects. Metal attachment cylinder that must be rounded chamfered with the containment that must be protected in such a manner to prevent likelihood of the causing the puncture damage of the other has the material packed with the requirement applying to any temporarily permanently attached cylinders such as the metal skid, safe device, pressure relief device, protection valve, safety devices, other connections if and applied with what is required by the authorized appropriate specifications required. 173.301 subchapter marking of the dot specification cylinder must conform with the applicable requirements. Each cylinder must be marked with the following information. Dot specification mark with the must appear with the file immediately with the surface pressure. For the example, the dot 31800. The serial number that must be placed just below the immediate following dot specification mark with the symbol letters must be placed just below the immediate before following the serial number. Other than variation sequence marking are authorized only when necessity local lack of space. Symbol of the numbers must be the manufacturer symbol that must be registered with the associated duplicate with the not authorized. Inspector official marking and the date of the test, such as the 595 for the May 1995, may be placed on the serial number. The information must be played with the date, and subsequent tests can be easily added with the example of the marking prescribed in paragraph F1 of this files. Additional required marking must be applied with the cylinder top of the words. The product must be played with a dot specification mark at the end of the closure finish shown that it has been welded. The spinning process or affected by plugging as prescribed in the specification 3HT statute 178.44, 3HT 178.45 of the applicable marking exemptions of the dot 3 cylinders is not required to be marked with the inspector mark with the serial number unless otherwise specified by the application specification. The mark of each cylinder must be stamped plainly and permanently on the shoulder of the top head of the neck. The size of each of the marking must be 25 a quarter inch of the space per minute. The other markings authorized provided with made in low stress area other than the sidewall and not side by the depth of the create with a harmful stress concentration. Some of the marking may not conflict. That required markings manufacturer reports to be before the time of the delivery. The private for the cylinder manufacturer must have the completed certification listed in CGA C11. The manufacturer cylinder must be retained. The reports required for the subpart with the 15 years original test of the day. The cylinder was 178.36. Specification 3A, 3AX, stainless steel cylinders, type size of the surface pressure for the additional requirements 178.35 cylinder must conform with the following. A .38 cylinder, seamless steel cylinder, water capacity not over 1,000 pounds, surface pressure of the at least 1,500 psi gauge. A .3AX seamless steel with a cylinder, water capacity not less than 1,000 pounds, or surface pressure of at least 500 psi gauge, conform with the following requirements, assuming the cylinder is to be with the support of the horizontally with the two ends only, with the uniformly loaded over the entire length with a consistently weight with the rear unit with the length of the straight cylinder portion filled with the water compressed to the specified test pressure for the sum of the 2 times of the maximum tensile strength above the bottom of the temperature due to the bending with the plug with the same 5 longitudinal stress due. Hydrostatic test may be 80% of the minimum yield stress for the steel with the maximum stress. The wall thickness must be increased with the necessary to meet requirements. Calculate the maximum longitudinal tensile strength due to the bending of the following formulas must be used. To calculate the maximum longitudinal tensile strength due to the hydrogen test pressure as following must be steel open herb with electrical steel uniform quality may be with the content of the percent with the must not exceed the following carbon 0.55 phosphorus 0.045 sulfur 0.50 identification material must be identified in any suitable method except for the plate with the bill of the hot drawn cylinders must be marked with a heat number. Manufactured cylinder must be manufactured using the equipment to produce the adequate to ensure that each of the cylinder produce the conform to the requirements for the subpart, no fissure. Other defects the permanent of the leak likely to weaken the finisher cylinder with is appreciable reasonable smooth with the uniform surface of the finishers were not originally free with the surface of the fact that the surface of the machine with the otherwise free but eliminate the defects. Thickness of the bottom cylinder well of the form spinning is no condition to be left at the 2 times the minimum wall thickness cylinder shell. Such bottom thickness must be measured at an area bound with the lining representing the points for the contact between the cylinder and floor over which when the cylinder is in vertical position. Welding, brazing. Welding or brazing with the portions of whatever the prohibited except the files. Welding or brazing authorized for attachment, net rings, foot rings, non-pressure parts, only parts of the top and the bottom of the cylinders having surface pressure of 500 psi gauge. Less cylinders, neck rings, foot rings must be made with a weldable steel carbon content which does not exceed 0.25% except for this in 4130 excess. Steel may have the proper welding procedure is permitted with the paragraph D of the section cylinder usually solely in hydrous ammonia. Cylinders may have 1/2 inch diameter to be bar welded within the concave wall bottoms. Wall thickness, cylinders with the surface pressure less than 900 psi gauge. Wall stress must not exceed 24 psi gauge. Minimum wall thickness of 100,000 of an inch required with the cylinder with over the 5 inches outside the diameter. The calculation must be made with the following formula. Opening threads are required. Opening the threads must clean out even without the cheek threads of the gauge. The tape thread threads when used must be length with not less than specified by the American Standard Taper Piper. Threads straight threads having at least 6 engaged threads that are authorized. Straight threads may have the type and the calculated shear strength of at least 10 times the test pressure for the cylinder with the gas adequate to prevent leakage if it is required. Hydrostatic test. Each of the cylinder must be successfully withstand the hydrostatic test. Valve test must be water jacketed. Other sustainable method to press as to be obtained. The accurate data of the pressure ensure with the gauge must permit the reading of the accuracy of the one person expansion gauge must permit reading of the total expansion of the accuracy with the 1% with the 1/10 of the cubic centimeter. Pressure must be maintained for at least 30 seconds sufficient long and ensure the complete with the expansion. Internal pressure applied with the heat treatment of the previous official test not exceed 90% of the test pressure. They have to do with the test apparatus. The test pressure cannot be maintained. Test may be to repeat the pressure increase with the 10% of the 100 psi gauge, whichever is lower. Permanent volumetric expansion must not exceed 10% of the total of the volumetric expansion. The test pressure each cylinder must be tested at least 5 3/4 of the times of the surface pressure. Flattening test. A flattening test must be performed on one cylinder of the test with random on each of the 2 or left of the packaging cylinder between the wedge shape of the knife edge with at least 60 degrees, including angle round. 1/2 inch radius for the longitudinal axis of the cylinder must be 90 degrees angled with the knife edge during the test. For lasts for 30 or less, flattening test is authorized to be used made in the ring at least 8 inches long, cut with each cylinder subject to the same heat treatment as finished cylinder. Physical test. Physical test must be conducted to determine the yield and strength of the tensile strength and elongation and reduction area of the materials foul. The test is required in 2 specimen cut with 1 cylinder for the random and each of the at least 200 or less. The lots for 3 or 30 or less physical tests are authorized to be made with a ring test 8 inches long cut with each of the cylinder with the subject of the same heat treatment and finished cylinder. Specimen must conform with the following gauge length with 8 inches with a width not more over than 1/2 inch with the gauge less length with 2 inches width over the 1.5 inches gauge length, at least 24 inches of thickness. The width not over 6 inches of the thickness of the authorized cylinder oil is not over 3/16 of an inch. Specimen exclusive of the grip end of the may not be flattened with the grip end of the may be flattened within 1 inch of the end of the reduction section. When size of the cylinder does not securing straight specimens. Specimen may be taken in any location. Direction may be straight and flat and cold and by pressure only, by not by flow. The specimen are to be taken and prepared with the inspector report, so it must show the connection with a record of physical test with the detailed information regarded to be specimen. Heating of the specimen for any with the purpose not authorized. Yield strength and intention must be strength with the corresponding permanent strength of 2 tons for the percent of the gauge length with the following conditions apply. The yield strength must determined by either the offset method of the extension under load method as prescribed in ASTM E8 and use extension under the load of the method of the total strength with the corresponding with the trap of 2%, 2/10 of the percent per permanent strain with the occur with the determined with the sufficient accuracy with the calculating elastic extension gauge length with the under appropriate load, and then adding the 2/10 of the percent with the gauge length. The elastic tension calculations must be based on the elastic module 30 million in the event of controversy interior of the stress strain of the diagram must be applied with the yield of the string determined from the 2/10 of the percent with the offset of the purpose of the strain with the measure of the initial stress that must be set with the well. The specimen and yield of the strain with the 12,000 psi gauge. Strain indicator reading must be set with the calculated corresponding strain with the crosshead speed with the testing of the machine not exceeding 1/8 of an inch per during the yield of strain with the determination. Acceptable result of the physical flattening test. Each of the following successful result: elongation at least 40% of the 2-inch gauge length with at least 20,000%. Other case yield the strength with over 73% tensile strength. In the instance of flat testing is not required. Elongation of 20% of the 2-inch gauge length with a 10%. In other case, the yield is strength with 73% of tensile strength with the instant flattening test is required without cracking 6 times with the wall thickness. Leakage has a spun cylinder. Plug cylinders must be tested with the leakage gas and air pressure after the bottom of the most clean is free with all the moisture subject to the following condition limitations. Pressure approximately the same and the dot left and surface pressure must be applied with one side of the finished bottom of the area of the least 1/16 of an inch whole area of the bottom not less than 3/4 of an inch of the diameter, including the closure at least 1 minute during the time of the other side of the bottom exposed. The pressure must be covered with water. Closely examine indication of leakage except the provided paragraph at the end of the section. Cylinder this leakage must be rejected. Alright, a spun cylinder is one with any of the closure finished cylinder that has been well that the spinning profit of the plug cylinder is one with the permanent closure of the bottom of the finished cylinder has been affected with the plug. A safety precaution if the manufacturer effective to make the test. Before the hydrostatic tip of the manufacturer shall design the test apparatus of the pressure applied with a small amount of area practicable around with the point closure so that even the small possible volume of the air or the gas. Reject cylinder reheat treatment is authorized. Rejected cylinders subsequent there. 2 cylinders must also be prescribed to the acceptable repair welding. Spinning and not authorized spun cylinders rejected under the provision paragraph M of the section may be removed by spun cylinders for the drilling to remove the defective materials, tapping and plugging. 178.37 specification 3AA 3AC stainless steel cylinders time size says surface pressure for the additional requirements of 178.35 cylinders must be ensured the following: 3AA cylinders, a stainless steel cylinder, water capacity over 1,000 pounds, surface pressure at least 150 psi gauge. 3AX cylinders, stainless steel cylinder, or water capacity not less than 1,000 pounds, with the surface pressure at least 500 psi gauge. With the following requirements: assuming the cylinder is to be supported with horizontally with 2 ends only with uniformly load over the entire length of the consisting of the weight per unit of the length of the straight cylinder portion filled with the water compressed to specify the test pressure sum of the 2 times maximum tensile strength in the bottom of the fibers due to the bending with the buzz for the same fibers. Longitudinal strength due to the hydrostatic test pressure may not exceed 80% of the minimum yield of strength of steel. As such, maximum strength wall thickness must be increased to the necessary to meet the requirements. To calculate the maximum tensile strength due to the bending with the following formula must be used. To calculate the maximum longitudinal tensile strength due to the hydrostatic test pressure following the formula be used. And then authorized steel, open hearth, basic action, electrical steel, uniform quality may be used. The heat of the steel may be done with the specification table 1, paragraph B of the check analysis, which is slightly off of size range. The acceptable satisfactory and all their inspection provided with the tolerance table 2 with the paragraph B of the not exceeded carbon borne steel heat. The hardenability test must be performed with the first and last and got each for the heat of the steel with the result of the test must be recorded with the chemical and acid material of the cylinder requiring 178.35. Hardness test must be even 5/16 of the inch from the quench end of the Gemini quench bar. Hardness must be not at least RC33, no more than RC53. The following chemical analysis authorized. Identification material. Material that must be identified in suitable method except for the plate with the bill with the hydron cylinder not the mark with a heat number to manufacture cylinder must be manufactured using the equipment of the profit the adequate to ensure that the cylinder of the product is conform with the requirement of the subpart. This non-feature the other defect for the permit is likely to weaken the finished cylinder appreciable the reasonable smooth and uniform surface of finish rejected not originally feared with the such defect with surfaces, maybe the machine otherwise treated but eliminate the defect with the thickness for the bottom cylinder well informed. Spinning is no condition by the less than 2 times the minimum wall thickness for the cylinder shell. The size of the bottom thickness are measured within the area bound by a line representing the bound points of the contact between the cylinder and flow of the cylinder is in vertical position. Welding brace. The welding brace any purpose whatsoever the prohibited except as follows. Welding brace authorized an attachment neck rings, foot ring for the non-pressure part, but only for those at the top of the bottom cylinder. Surface pressure for the 500 psi gauge on their left of the cylinder. Neck ring with the foot rings must be made with weldable steel carbon content, which will not exceed 25 hundredths of the percent, except for the class 4130 X. Which may be either the wrapper welding procedure, the permitted the paragraph to either the section wall thickness for each of the cylinder must conform with the following. For cylinder surface pressure less than 900 psi gauge, the wall stress with the next 2400 psi, minimum wall thickness 100,000 of an inch. The required with each of the cylinder outside the diameter over 5 inches. The for cylinder surface pressure with the 900 psi gauge more than the minimum was for the wall stress. The minimum specified test pressure may not exceed 67% of the minimum tensile strength of the test. Steel as determined in physical test as required in paragraphs K and L of the section must be not over the 70,000 psi. Calculation must be made of the formula. Heat treatment complete with the cylinder must be uniformly properly with the heated treated prior to the test. The heat treatment of the cylinders are authorized in the analysis must be cylinder. All cylinders must be quenched over the suitable medium such as the paragraph G of the section 5 of this section. Steel temperature quenchable must be recommended with the steel analysis if it might exceed 1,750 for the temperature degrees Fahrenheit. All steel must be tempered. The temperature must be suitable to the other steel. Minimum temperature tensioning may not be less than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, except for the paragraph G6 of the section. For 4130X must be in that nature normalized with a temperature of 1650 degrees Fahrenheit, and some of the quenched from the cylinder that is normalized and even not to be tempered. Intermediate magnesium steel may be tempered with a temperature less than 1,150 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat treatment in each cylinder must be submitted. Magnetic test detect with the present quench and crack. The cracked cylinder must be rejected and destroyed. Except otherwise provided with the paragraph G6 of the section. All cylinders of water is quenched with the quenched liquid producing cooling rate, except for the 80% of the cooling rate of the water must be inspected with the magnet particle dye penetration. Ultrasonic method to detect with the presence of the quenching cracks. Any cylinder design requirement specification 3AA found to have the quenching crack must be rejected, may not be qualified. Cylinders designed to meet the requirements for the specification 3AAX and found to have cracks must have remove this metal and mechanical for the specification 3AX of the will be acceptable to repaired area with the subsequent examine area to ensure the defect will determine the design thickness requirements are met. Opening in the cylinder connection valve, fire plugs, etc. For those opening threads required on opening thread must be clean cut even without checks and gauges. Taper threads with the length of the long, not less than specified with American Standard taper pipe threads. Straight threads have at least 6 end gauge threads that are authorized. Straight threads must have a tight fit with a calculated shear strength with over at least 10 times the test pressure cylinder gasket. Adequate to prevent leakage and required hydrostatic test. Each cylinder must be successfully withstand hydrostatic test as follows. Test must be either water jacket or other suitable method of unrejectedly obtain the accurate depth of the present zero gauge that must be permitted the reading of the accuracy of 1%. Expansion gauge that must be permitted reading of the total expansion of the accuracy of 1% of the 1/10 of the cubic centimeter. Pressure must be maintained for at least 30 seconds sufficient along with the ensure for the complete with the expansion. Internal pressure applied with the heat treatment of the previous to the official test of the may not exceed 90% of the test pressure. If due failure test apparatus the test pressure cannot be maintain the test may be repeated pressure for the increase to 10% with the 100 psi gauge, whichever is lower. Permanent volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total volumetric expansion from the test pressure. Each cylinder must be tested at least 5 1/3 of the time on the surface pressure. Flat testing must perform one cylinder test randomly. One at each lot of 200 or less may be packed with cylinders between the wedge shape of the knife at the edge of the 60-degree angle, including angle run at the half-inch radius and longitudinal axis of the cylinder. Must be 90 degrees over the knife edge during the test for a lap of 30 or less. The flattening test authorized to be made with the ring at least 8 inches long, cut with each of the cylinders subject with the same heat treatment. The finished cylinders may be shoved with the bend test lube with the flattening test. To bend the test specimens must be taken in accordance with the ISO 98091 ASTME E290 and must be subject to the bend test specified. The physical test must be conducted to determine the yield of the tensile strength of the elongation reduction area of the material's fouls. Test required in 2 specimen cut with one cylinder over the random out of each at least 200 or less. For there are lots of 3 or less physical tests, but they authorized to be made with one ring on a ring at least 8 inches long with a cut with each cylinder. They're not subject to the same heat treatment as finished cylinder. Specimens conform with the following gauge length with 8 inches for the width of the not over 1/2 inches, 1.5 inches gauge of 2 inches width of the not over 1.5 inches of the gauge length of at least 24 inches, 24 times the thickness of the width of not over 6 inches for the thickness of the cylinder wall not over 30/16 of an inch. Specimen inclusive of the grip to not be flat with the grip. The ends may be flat within 1 inch of the end of the reduction section. When size cylinder does not permit the screwing the straight press, specimens must be taken within location and direction, may be straightened with flat and cold by pressure only, not by below. Specimens are not be so taken and prepared with the inspector report may be shown with a connection record of the physical test of detailed information regarding the specimen, heating the authorized specimen, the pressure, purpose not authorized, yield strength, the tension must be stressed for the corresponding to the permanent strength of the 0.2% of the gauge length for the following conditions apply. Yield of strength must be determined either by offset method, extension under load method described in ASTM EA, and using the extension over the load with the method, the total strength with the corresponding with the strength of the 0.2% with the permanent with the strength of the curve determined with the sufficient accuracy. Calculation, elastic expansion, extension of the gauge length with over and under appropriate load with the adding together 0.2% of the gauge length. Elastic extension calculation must be made with elastic module 300 million. In the event of the controversy, entry of the strain chart of the diagram must be applied with the yield strength determined of 0.2% offset. For purpose of strain measurement of the initial strength, there must be set with the specimen under the strength of the 1200 psi stream indicator with the reading being set with the calculator with the corresponding string with the cross head speed with the testing with the machine not exceeding 1/8 of an inch per minute during yield strength determination. Acceptable result physical test and bending. An acceptable result of the physical flat testing with the elongation of at least 20% of the 2 inch for the gauge length with at least 10% of the other case flattening without cracking the 6 times the wall thinking for the cylinder is acceptable result of the alternative bending test that does not crack with the cylinder but bent inward around with the mandrel with the interior edge of the no further apart with the diameter over the mandrel. Leakage test all spun cylinder with the plug cylinder that must be tested for the leakage and gas. Air pressure for the aft to the bottom must be clean and free of all moisture. Pressure approximately the same at the not less than the strip of the pressure must be applied through the one side of the finish and bottom over the area with at least 1/16 of the total area of the bottom and less than 3/4 inches of the diameter. Include the closure at least 1 minute during which of the time and the other side of the bottom exposed with the pressure be covered by water. Closely examine the indication leakage provided the paragraph at the end with the section cylinder must be rejected if the end leakage in the spun cylinder if the one over the end of the closure finished cylinder has been spun with and welded by a spinning process. A plug cylinder is one with which with the permanent closure bottom of the finished cylinder has been affected with the plug. The safety precaution manufacturer elects to make with the test for the hydrostatic tip of the manufacturer should design the test appropriate to that the pressure is applied with the smallest area of the practicable with the point of the closure and so that you with the smallest possible volume of the air gas. Reject the cylinder reheated treatment. If it is authorized, rejected cylinder subject for thereto. The cylinder must be also prescribed and tested with acceptable repair, welding, and spinning, and not authorized spun cylinders rejected under provision. Paragraph the end of the section must be removed of the spun cylinder category, drilling the removal of the defective material, the tapping, and plugging. 178, specification 3B seamless steel cylinders. Type and size of the surface pressure of the .3B with the cylinder steam cell and with water capacity nominal not over 1,000 pounds with the surface pressure at least 150 not over 500 psi gauge. Steel open earth and electrical steel with a uniform quality must be with a content percent with the next found carbon of 0.55, phosphorus 0.045, sulfur 0.050. Identification material must be identified with any suitable method except for the plate for the bills. Hot drone cylinders must be marked with a heat number. The manufacturer cylinders must be manufactured using the equipment process adequate to ensure that each cylinder produced to conform with the requirements of the subpart, no fissure, other defects permanent with the likely weakening of the finished cylinder, appreciable, responsible, smooth with the reinformed surface of the finish, reject with the original free with the defect with the surface must be machined, otherwise treated with eliminate the defect. Thickness of the bottom cylinder welded form and spinning is then under no condition to be left within 2 times minimum wall thickness of the cylindrical shell, such as bottom thickness to be measured within an area around with the lightly line prepped with the points of the contact between the cylinder and the floor of the cylinder is in vertical position. Welding and brazing is the purpose of whatsoever the prohibited except for the foul. Welding and brazing authorized an attachment, neck ring, foot or foot ring, and foot rings, which are non-pressure parts only with the top of the bottom of the cylinder to have the surface pressure of 500 psi gauge or less. Left cylinder net ring foot fairings must be made with a weldable steel carbon content which may not exceed 0.25% except in the case of the 4130X steel may be within proper welding procedure. As permitted paragraph D of the section, wall thickness, wall stress must exceed 24,000 pounds, minimum wall thickness of 90 thousandths of an inch for any cylinder with the outside diameter of 6 inches. Calculation must be made with the following formulas. Heat treatment of the completed cylinder must be uniform with the property with the heat treated prior to the test. Opening and cylinder with the connection without fuse plug, etc. for the opening of these threads conforming to the following are required, and all opening threads must be clean and cut even without checks to the gauge. Taper threads may be used, but must be length but not less than specified American standard taper pipe threads. Straight threads with at least 4 end gauge threads. For the authorized straight threads must be a type fit for the calculated shear strength with at least 10 times the test pressure cylinder gasket adequate. Prevent leakage is required. Hydrostatic test cylinders must be successfully withstand hydrostatic tests as follows. Test must be a water jacket. Other suitable method operated with the obtained with accurate data of the pressure gauge must be permit reading to accuracy. Permit expansion gauge must permit reading of the total expansion of the accuracy either 1% of the 10th of the cubic meter. Cubic centimeter pressure must be maintained at least 10-30 seconds if sufficiently to ensure the complexity expansion. Internal pressure applied with the heat treatment of pressure value. The official test may not exceed 10% of the test pressure due to the failure. Test apparatus test pressure cannot be maintained with the test. Maybe the rejected pressure included increased by 10% 100 psi gauge, whichever is lower. Permanent volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total volumetric expansion test pressure. 4 cylinders must be tested to follow each cylinder at least 2 times the surface pressure. 1 cylinder out of each lot of 200 left. At least 3 times the test pressure. Other must be examined under the pressure 2 times surface pressure and shall know in effect. Flattening testing. Flattening testing must be performed once over the test ran of the one each of the 2 or left of the plane, placing a cylinder between the wedge shape of the knife edge between 60-degree angle of the rounded off the half-inch and radius. The total longitudinal axis of the cylinder must be 90 degrees out of the knife edge during the test for the left 30 degrees or less. For 30 or less, flattening testing authorized to be made of the ring at least 8 inches long cut for each cylinder. And some subject to the same heat 3-minute finish cylinder. Physical test must be conducted to determine the yield of the strength, the tensile strength, elongation, reduction of the area of the material as follows. The test is required in 2 specimen cut with the cylinder taken random out of one over each of the lot of 2 or left of the lots of 30 or less. Physical tests for the authorized made with the ring at least 8 inches long cut with the one over each of the cylinder subject to the same heat with the finished cylinder of the specimen must conform with the following gauge length of the 8 inches width over the 1.5 inch of the gauge of the length of the 2 inch of the width of the not over the 1.5 inch gain length of the gauge length of 24 times the thickness of the width which is not over the 6 times the thickness of the authorized of the cylinder wall with a 3/16 of an inch. Specimen exclusive of grip ends may be not flattened. The grip ends may be flattened to which 1 inch of the end of the reduced section. When size cylinder does not permit the securing straightening specimen must be taken in location direction, may be straightened with a flat and cold. The pressure of the only not for the by blows when specimen are so taken and prepared. Inspector reports must show the connection regarding the physical test, the detail of the information regarding such specimen. Heating of the specimen of the purpose of not authorized yield strength of the tension must be sure that the corresponding with the permanent strength of the 2/10 of the percent of the gauge length of the following condition. Yield strength must be determined by either the offset method or the extension or underload method as described in ASTM E8. And using extension under the load method, the total strength of the tension under load corresponding to the strength of the weight of the 2/10 of the percent of the strain of the curve will be determined with the sufficient accuracy calculation of the elastic extension and of gauge length and under appropriate load with the adding of the 2/10 of the percent of the gauge length with the elastic extension calculation must be made with the elastic module of 30 million. In the event of the controversy in the entire accurate strength strain with the diagram applied with the yield of the strength of the determined of the 2/10 of the percent offset. The purpose of the strain measurement with the initial strain must be set with the specimen achieved with the understrain the 12% PSI with the strain indicated the rating being set with the calculated corresponding strain. The crosshead speed of the testing machine not exceeding 1/8 of an inch per minute during yield of strength determination. Acceptable result of the physical flattening test either the following: the acceptable result of the elongation law for the 40% of the 2-inch gauge length with at least 10 or 20% of the other cases yield strength not over 73%. Tensile strength in the instance of the flattening test not required. Elongation of at least 20% of the 2-inch gauge length with 10% of the other cases the yield strength not over 73% of the tensile strength flattening is required without cracking 6 times in wall thickness and leakage. Of all spun cylinders, plug cylinders must be tested leakage gas for the air pressure after the bottom has been clean and free of all the moisture subject to the following conditions: limitation, pressure, proximity with the same. Is but not less than surface pressure must be applied one side of the finished bottom over the other, at least 1/16 of the total area of the bottom, and not less than 3/4 of an inch of the diameter, including the closure with at least 1 minute during the weather time on the other side of the bottom. Exposed with the pressure must be covered with water, closely examined in indication leakage. Septic barrier at the end of the section cylinder must be rejected if there is any leak. A spun cylinder is one of the which for the enclosed one and end closure of the finished cylinder that have been involved in the spinning process. Plug cylinder is one of the which the permanent closure in the bottom of a finished cylinder has been effective with the plug with a safety precaution with the manufacturer effective with make with the tap before hydrostatic heat shift. The design of the apparatus so that the pressure is applied with the smallest area of the pressure to pull around to the point of the closure as over the small for the possible volume of the air pressure. Rejected cylinders. Reheat treatment of the rejected cylinders authorized. Subsequent thereto, cylinders must pass all of the prescribed tests to do the acceptable repair welding, spinning, and not authorized spun cylinder for the rejected with the unprovisioned paragraph N with the section by removed from the spun cylinder category with the drilling, remove the defect with the material of the taping and plugging. Markings may be stamped with the sidewall cylinders have the surface pressure of 100 150 psi gauge foam with conditions are met. Well strip the test pressure of the exceeding 24,000 psi minimum wall thickness now the more than 90,000 inch depth of the sample must be no greater than 15% of the minimum wall thickness by min-max will exceed 15,000 inch. May not be outside of the diameter of cylinder not exceeding 5 inches. Content cylinder may not exceed 1/4% of the carbon content, 1/4% of the complete cylinder may not normalize after stamping. Stamping must be adjacent to the top of the head. 178/39 specification 3BN seamless nickel cylinders type side of the surface pressure dot 3BN cylinders for seamless nickel for the cylinder water capacity nominal not over 125 pounds water capacity nominal for the surface pressure the 150 not over the 500 psi gauge nickel the percent of the nickel to cobalt must not exceed 99%. Identification of the material identified suitable with the method except for the plate with the hot drawn cylinders must be marked with a heat number. Manufacturer cylinders manufactured with using the equipment process adequate to ensure the cylinder produce the conform with the requirements for the describer. No defect of the permit likely to weaken finished cylinder. Appreciable with reasonable smooth with the uniform surface of the finishes required cylinders closed within spinning profit not authorized welding and brazing any others whatsoever the prohibited except for the welding authorized with the attachment net rings and foot rings over the non-pressure part but only to the top and the bottom of the cylinder. Net rings and foot rings must be made weldable part of weldable material carbon content with which for the next the 1/4% of the nickel welding rod must be used. Welding thickness, welding wall strip of the next exceeding 15,000 psi with a minimum wall thickness of the 100,000th of the inch is required of any of the cylinder of 5 inches outside the diameter with a stress calculation must be made using the following formula. Heat treatment. The complete cylinders must be uniformed properly with the heat treated prior to the test. Opening and cylinders connection valve fuses, plugs, etc. for the opening with the thread conforming to the following that are required. The opening thread must clean and cut even without the chief of the gauge. Taper the thread has been used to be with length of not less than specified American standard taper pipe threads. Straight threads having at least 6 engaged threads are authorized. Straight threads must have the tight fit with the calculated and shear strength of at least 10 times the test pressure of the cylinder gasket adequate to prevent leakage as required. Hydrostatic test of each cylinder must be successfully withstand the hydrostatic test. As well, the test must be water jacket. Other suitable method operated to obtain accurate data. The pressure of the gauge must permit the reading of the accuracy of 1%. Expansion of the gauge for the permit of the reading of the total over the expansion accuracy of the 1% of the 10th of the cubic centimeter. The pressure must be maintained at least 30% and 30 seconds. The significant sufficiently ensure the complete with expansion internal pressure applied with the heat treatment previous to the official test of the exceed 90% of the test pressure. If due to the failure of the test apparatus, the test pressure cannot be made. The test must be repeated with the pressure then increase with a 10% or 100 psi gauge, whichever is lower. Permanent with the volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total volumetric expansion for the test pressure. Each cylinder must be tested at least two times with the surface pressure. Flattening test. The flattening test must be performed one cylinder with the test of the random out of the each leaf of a lot with the lesser place cylinder. Between the forehead shaped with the knife at the edge of the ship with a 60-degree angle with around the half inch for the radius. The longitudinal axis of the cylinder must be 90-degree angle with knife edges during the test of the floor. The left of the 30 or left of the flattening test authorized to be made with a ring at least 8 inches long with the cover of each of the cylinders subject to the same heat treatment. Finished cylinders. Physical test must be conducted with determine the yield of the tensile strength of elongation, reduction of the area of the material is fouls. Test is required with 2 specimens of each cylinder to take of the random out over the least 2 of the last of the 4 of the 30 or left of the physical test for the authorized made with the ring at least 8 inches long with the cut. Each cylinder subject to the same heat treatment. The finished cylinder specimen must conform to the following. A gauge length with 8 inches with the width of over 1.5 inches of the gauge, the length of the 2 inches width of not over 1.5 inches of the gauge, the length of the 24 times the thickness of the width of not over 16 inches over the 6 inches, 6 times the thickness of the authorized cylinder wall with not over 3/16 of the inch. Specimen next sweep with the grip of the end, but it may not be flattened. Grip end, but it may be flattened for 1 inch for the end of the reduction section. When side of the cylinder does not permit the securing strength of the specimen may take up the aim of the location, direction, and may be straight with the flattened cold with the pressure of the only not by below specimen, or so taken the purveyor with the inspector report must be shown with the connection with the recorded physical test with the detailed information regarding the specimen. Heating of the specimen A with the purpose of not authorized yield of strength with the tension must be struck with the corresponding with the permanent strength with the 2/10 of the percent gauge length with the following conditions applied with the yield of strength must also determine either by the offset method, the extension under load with the method as prescribed in ASTME E8. And use the extension under the load method of total strength with the corresponding with the strength with at least 2/10 of the percent permanent strain curve with the determined with the sufficient accuracy for the calculation elastic extension with the gauge length with the under appropriate load. Adding thereto the 2/10 of the percent of the gauge elastic extension calculation must be made with elastic module 30 million. In the event of the controversy, the entire strain stress strain with the diagram must be applied with the yield of the strain determined in 2/10 of the percent offset for the purpose of the strain measurement. The initial stress must be set with a specimen under the stress of the 12,000 psi. Strain indicator reading must be set with a calculated corresponding strain. Cross-headed speed of the testing machine may not exceed 1/8 of an inch per minute during the yielded strength determination. Acceptable result of the physical flat testing, either of the following acceptable result along each any elongation of at least 40% of the 2-inch gauge length with the 20% of the other cavity yielding point not over 50%. Tensile strengthening in the instance of flat testing is not required. Elongation of at least 20% of the 2-inch gauge length with 10% of the other cavity yielded point not over 50% till tensile strength flattening is required without the cracking of the six times the wall thickness. Rejected cylinders heat treatment is authorized. Rejected cylinders subsequent thereto. The cylinders must pass all prescribed tests. The acceptable repair welding is not authorized. 178.42 Specification 3E Seamless steel cylinders.